How about a show of hands? Has anybody ever heard of Corteva Agriscience? Be honest. Okay, it's a $20 billion, Dana's heard of it, $20 billion company you've never heard of. It's the output of the merger of the Dow and DuPont organizations, where they combined their agricultural resources on the crop protection side and also on the seed development side, and in a really interesting merger. And then Dana has been responsible for forming the narrative of this new $20 billion infant company that promises to be a new kind of agriculture company with a new kind of brand promise, a new kind of culture. You think about merging these amazing brands like Dow and DuPont that have had 150-year rich histories and legacies, and then layer on top of that Pioneer Seed, which was purchased by DuPont several years ago. And you've got almost 3 disparate cultures that Dana's also responsible for integrating into one cohesive unit. So he's got a huge job ahead of him. We call this session the big bang of a new narrative, because basically he's telling the story of a new company, a very, very important company in the agriculture space, a very, very important company that has a charge with feeding the world. As Dr. Keenum said this morning, the world's going to grow to 10 billion people. We're going to add 3 billion people in the next 25 years. The current methods of agriculture production, agricultural research, agricultural development are not going to cut it. The status quo is not going to cut it. There's going to have to be completely new innovations around agriculture, and part of that innovation is basic communications. How do we explain this story? How do we get suppliers bought into the story? How do we get people bought into the story? How do we get consumers and activists understanding our point of view? Just because we're a big agriculture company doesn't mean we're a bad agriculture company. So lots and lots and lots of different challenges. Full disclosure, Dana and I worked together very closely for the last 11 years at the Coca-Cola Company, where Dana led all of the communication for our bottling system. Just a small little job that kept him on the, I would say Dana was probably on the road 300 out of 365 days. I'm not over-exaggerating. He was our international man of mystery. He's continuing that. And we'll get into a little bit of that discussion too about what made him, what pulled him in to take on this radically new, exciting, and huge job as the head of communications for this massively important company in Corteva. Dana is also, I should say, since we're in an academic environment, he's a graduate from Washington and Lee University, where he also sits on the Board of Regents for W&L, and has acted in a spokesperson capacity for the university on various issues over the years, and is all in. And that beautiful little campus in Lexington, Virginia, in the Shenandoah Valley, Dana spends quite a bit of time in there. He's also on the advisory board for the Department of Communications at the College of Charleston. So I think between Lexington and Charleston, you pick your place as well, Dana. So but we're thrilled to have him here in Starkville with us today for, I think, will be a really fun interview keynote. So without any further ado, please welcome Dana Bolden.
The merger started as most things do in corporate America, with a bit of outside agitation. There's a gentleman by the name of Nelson Peltz with Trion Group, who's largely described as an activist investor. And he saw Dow and DuPont companies as being very similar and argued for a merger, and in fact called for a shareholder vote. It is the first shareholder vote that Nelson Peltz lost. Both companies were successful in fighting off his terms, basically, but they saw the handwriting. They saw the writing on the wall and knew that they had to do something to get synergies out of both of those companies. Now, the third part in here that very rarely gets mentioned is 18 years ago, DuPont acquired Pioneer Seeds. And Pioneer is the second most recognized brand in agriculture behind John Deere. So you had Pioneer Seeds that was part of the DuPont company and Dow coming together. And so the companies looked at the balance sheets, looked at the portfolios, and said, we've got to go ahead and do this merger because we can return almost $1 billion worth of synergies back to shareholders. So that happened. That became official in September 2017. We came up with the identity for Corteva in February of 2018, and April 1st, Dow will spin out of this conglomerate. DuPont and Corteva will remain. The morning of June 3rd, Corteva will start trading on the New York Stock Exchange, and that afternoon, DuPont will start trading on the stock exchange. So companies with varied history coming together to create three very different companies. The great thing for us, though, is as the conglomerates that they were, throughout the years, each of them sort of stockpiled these ag holdings, and every year there was a rumor that they were going to sell off this property or that property. And we finally were able to stop that whole rumor by bringing all the ag holdings together to create this. It's actually $16 billion. I don't mean to correct you, but it's $16 billion in revenue, 22,000 large employee company that will go live June 3rd.
Wow, that's great. Let's fast forward to the past 18 months. You've had a long and storied career at the Coca-Cola Company, rising star executive. What made you want to get out of your comfort zone to take on this massive job with lots of complexity, lots of challenge? What was the motivating factor there?
Well, Coca-Cola is a wonderful company, and people only leave Coca-Cola for three reasons, basically. You either retire or you get retired, which has happened quite often. You leave to start your own company, or you move to something that is more purpose-driven. And fortunately for me, I was in the latter category. I had talked to this company for about 18 months as they were going through the merger process. And one of the things that they said they were looking for is someone who could bring farmers and consumers closer together. And I kept saying no. I was very happy. I'd planned on retiring at Coke, and they'd come back with another offer. And, you know, our company doesn't have the most desirable geographic footprint when it comes to places to live. And so it was Des Moines, Iowa, or Indianapolis, Indiana, and I didn't want to move to either one of those places. And so that was one of the big sticking points. But the more I got to know the industry and the people, the more this became pretty exciting. And the final sort of decision point for me was they wanted to create a new brand in an industry where there was a lot of consolidation going on. So as our consolidation was happening, there are only three players in the sector that we're in right now. There's the former Monsanto that has a lot of negative baggage that people remember. They've been acquired by Bayer, and they've retired the Monsanto name. Syngenta was the other company that's in the space, and in this space, by the way, is we call it agricultural inputs. It's people that sell seeds and crop protection, so that's the sector that we're in. Syngenta was the second company that was in this space. They got acquired by ChemChina. So now they're a Chinese-owned entity. When we come out of this on June 3rd, are going to be the only U.S.-based pure-play input company in the world. We've got a global footprint, but we're the only U.S.-based company. So that was exciting, and the fact that when I joined, we didn't have a name, we didn't have a brand, we didn't have visual iconography, we had nothing. And they said, please come and create this for us. And if you've been at a company like Coca-Cola, where brands are key, and you know that's the lifeblood, you get one of these opportunities in a career if you're lucky to come and create something brand new. So I tell people I left to go to a startup, but it was an incredibly well-funded startup, and that we're going to hit the ground running. So that was really the driver. And then the more I get into it, you know, agriculture is typically something you're born into. Most people don't just go to agriculture out of having a career doing something else. And so that was a tremendous challenge. And you've got to really earn your stripes.
Sure.
You can be technically competent, but you've got to build trust
Right.
with farmers. And that's not, farmers get burned by Mother Nature every year. They get burned by the government every year.
Yeah.
It's really hard to earn farmers' trust.
Sure.
And so that was an exciting proposition.
So you talked about tabula rasa, walking into this blank slate of an environment as far as the messaging. So for the professional communicators in the room, can you kind of walk us through, Dana, the process of getting to the narrative? And then let's segue into what is the narrative.
Sure. So again, we're looking at this landscape that was one of unprecedented change. The top three players in the industry all had massive change going on. We knew we wanted to create something different. We did a lot of research to understand what farmers' biggest concerns were outside of the weather, outside of government interference. That narrative that they came back with was they wanted two things from a new company. They wanted somebody who would stand up and advocate for their rights, because every other company kind of just put profits above all else and didn't really. If you have the best chemistry to sell to a farmer, they're going to buy it because they know it works. And if it doesn't work, then they won't come back the next year. There was not a whole lot of brand love or brand loyalty, and there isn't a whole lot of brand love and loyalty in agriculture. Farmers are very much show me. If your seeds didn't meet my expectations this year, I won't come back. That's that, and you only get one shot at doing that. So that's part of it. And so they wanted somebody who could advocate for their interests, and deliver quality products. But the second is farmers felt like they were under attack by consumers. Most consumers think their food comes from the grocery store. They have no idea where food comes from. And having someone advocate and explain to consumers not only the challenges that are involved in bringing food to the table, but also the fact that farmers are the most responsible stewards of land. It makes no sense. I sit and I've listened to a lot of activists around the world in this new role, because I did this very extensive listening tour for 6 months where I just wanted to understand what our customers were saying, what the consumers were saying, and what the activists were saying. And everywhere I said is, one of the recurring themes was that farmers are ruining the environment. And I look and I just shake my head in disbelief. There is not a farmer that I've met that is not a responsible steward of the land, because that is their livelihood. There is not one incentive for a farmer to be irresponsible with the land that they farm on. So trying to change that narrative and being a company that could speak on behalf of farmers, deliver quality products, and really advocate even in tough times. And it's been a hard year to do that for farmers. If you think about the current administration and the policies that have been enacted that have adversely impacted farmers, the China tariffs just threw farming economy into a tailspin this year. It's been just awful. And no one has, well, until we came along, I like to think, no one has raised a hand and said, look, this is bad for our customers' business, and it's putting them at harm. And so that amount of research helped us form the narrative.
Sure. So the mechanics then, so you relied a lot on focus groups with farmers. You guys are also trying to be more consumer facing as well. So.
I tend to ramble. I'm sorry.
No, that's great.
I didn't really answer your question. No. So we surveyed about 3,000 farmers as we began to build our visual identity and our brand and our narrative to understand those concerns. So that was sort of the baseline mechanism that we did. Then we also have what we call an insight series. So in every country, well, in the top 22 countries in which we do business, we do 2 insight series every year, one with our customers and one with consumers and activists. Or I've actually been counseled by our lawyers not to call them activists anymore. I'm supposed to call them people with opposing points of view. So we bring the people with opposing points of view together with consumers and let them share their thoughts in a defined space about crop protection, which is largely pesticides, biotechnology as it relates to gene editing and genetically modified foods, to hear their concerns. And those sessions, as well as the 3,000 farmer survey, served as our benchmark to understand how we should best position our company as we come out of the shell, as it were.
Great, that's great. As far as resources, you rely on, you've got a scrappy team, and you've got a lot of work. How do you manage that process of overseeing brand, marketing, internal communication, external communication? Is it a lot of agency reliance, or internal, or a mixture of both? Or
well, it's a mixture of both, but the benefit, so one of the structures that was put in place, when you have 2 companies like DowDuPont come together, there was an antitrust concern at the beginning of the process. So we had to sell off some of the components of our ag business, our core ag business, so we wouldn't pose a threat to the industry. But part of that remedy also understood that when we had to sell off some of those assets, the merger created an incredible fund for us to build a new brand. I mean, we sold some assets that were very, very profitable. So as a result of those remedies, we were granted a pretty generous budget that we had for 18 and 19 to help build the brand. So we've got a very small team. We set strategy. We have a number of agencies that help us execute the strategies. But for us, the way we prioritize it is to say, I mean, it's almost a basic business model. We look at our business objectives as an organization, figure out how we can best align with those objectives. So we go to market on 3 basic platforms. We've got seeds, crop protection, the chemistry, and then digital. So we've really aligned our teams around that. We've created a 4th pillar called corporate, because we also have to sell the stock. So our teams are largely divided into supporting those 3 business pillars, and then a financial team that is targeting Wall Street to tell our narrative. And if you think about those 4 pillars as sort of the funnel in the organization, the funnel into the organization, we kind of, it's almost like an hourglass model. Those are the four at the top, the four at the bottom are all largely internally focused. So, reaching our employees, reaching our sales teams, which for us are very different in that our sales teams are not employees. They're very much like the Coke system, and they pay us a fee to represent a territory. So someone will buy a franchise and manage that franchise and sell in that territory. So we've got employees, we've got our what we call our sales agents, we've got our suppliers, and then the other business partners. And so those messages kind of go both ways through that hourglass,
Right.
and match up. That's how we match up to our various audiences.
Great. Getting people to believe your message, you think about the two massive legacy brands that are behind Corteva. Barry was talking about the breast implant issue, and she led Dow Corning communication back in the day. There's obviously some baggage with both great, unbelievable American brands that helped shape 19th and 20th century commerce, and now moving on into the 21st century, but also some baggage as well. You're coming out of the gates positioned as a new kind of ag company. How do you reconcile the baggage of the parent and this new company?
Ideally, I wish we could pick and choose. We could say we only got the good things from all the old companies. But we have some advertising that I think really says it best. We're a startup that's 200 years old. So if you go into some of the billboards, we have a tremendous presence in Indy, in Johnston, and Philadelphia, which is the Wilmington area. That's our billboard, and it says we're a startup that's 200 years old. We do take all of the best science, we take all of the best chemistry from our companies, and we promote that heavily. But I'll share with you an example of how that baggage manifests itself and how we managed it. We have a technology that's called CRISPR, and CRISPR is just a very quick layman's definition. GMO, genetically modified, is where you take a DNA strand from something that is not what you're using now. So just imagine, we'll take corn as an example. You take some of the strain from a banana and you put it into corn to make it more hardy, make it stand taller, those sorts of things. That's a very, very broad definition of GMO. CRISPR technology is where you take that strand and you take out all the bad things. So think about peanuts as a for example. You can actually remove those DNA strands that cause allergies. So it's almost a cut and paste. That's technology that we've pioneered that has not yet come to market. We have licensed that technology to the fruits and vegetables industry because we don't sell many fruits and vegetables. We're essentially grains and row crops. But to increase consumer awareness of what we're doing, we hired Alton Brown, the famous chef who cooks with chemistry, and we partnered with Atlantic Monthly, a magazine, a pretty influential magazine, and had a conversation about CRISPR technology. We had 3 panelists who were pro-CRISPR, 3 panelists who were anti-CRISPR, and had them just have a conversation. There was no agenda about someone having to win. It was we wanted to hear both sides of that conversation. And we web streamed it. It was not live. You couldn't attend. You could only watch it on the web. And I'm tracking the conversations that are happening, and it's pretty organic at first. It's about, it's basically based on the merits of the arguments, that this is clean, it's great, no, we think it's Franken technology. Well, all of a sudden the bots got involved, and people started programming this, and this is the same technology that brought you Bhopal. And all the bots started flooding that technology. So here's something that we felt like we could be pretty far removed from that discussion about a heritage company issue. So we know we've got that to deal with. But the most genuine, honest, sincere way we can get around it is to talk about the technologies that transferred over and those that didn't. And that's one of the things we're very clear about. We no longer have to fight with industrial chemicals or specialty materials or anything along those lines. Everything we do is focused on the farmer.
It's great. We're talking a lot at this conference about, Dana, about transformation and disruption. How disruptive has this integration between the 3 legacy brands been to employees?
I don't think it was by design, Steve. So if you were at one of the legacy companies, this merger had been telegraphed for about 18 months. Then between the time of the merger and the time of the spins, as we call it, has been about another 2 years. One of the byproducts is that is people just wanted to belong to something. People were confused every day when they came in the office because they didn't know who they worked for anymore. So when we created the Corteva identity and people were assigned to that program, there was a tremendous amount of excitement to say, wow, we finally belong to something. We're not part of this DWP conglomeration anymore. And I think the people who are going to DuPont and the people who are going to Dow feel the same way, because there was a 2-year period where there was no clarity. In that time of uncertainty, when we announced our mission and our vision and our values, they were very clear. Put the customer at the center of everything we do. Probably not the most novel concept. Any company out there could say that. But also that we want to ensure progress for those who are customers and be fully transparent. And Barry and I were joking earlier today, we've actually committed to radical transparency. I don't know exactly what that is yet. We haven't figured out what that means, but we're going to get there and figure out what radical transparency means. But our employees widely grasped, they held onto that because they felt like we're one of the companies going to tell the truth. In our space, in the input industry, it was very difficult to get somebody to tell the truth as a company. We make products that make farmers more effective, but some of them are really scary because they kill things. By very definition, 1/3 of our portfolio is designed to kill bugs, designed to kill weeds, and you've got to be transparent about that and what it means and how we test to ensure that those things only kill the things they're designed to kill and not anything else. And when you have that level of transparency with your employee base, they tend to appreciate it. Even in the old culture, you would be hard-pressed to find an executive who would tell you on stage in a public setting that we make things that kill things. But it's a truth.
Right.
It is an absolute truth. A farmer cannot have a successful yield if they don't kill the bugs, the insects, and the weeds. No way.
Right. And that radical transparency or transparency is resonating with employees?
Resonating with employees, not so much with the people with opposing points of view.
Explain.
So, great example for the last week that has been my life. There is a very arcane piece of legislation in Brazil that says in order for you to introduce a pesticide, you have to you have to force feed that pesticide to 36 beagles for 1 year. At the end of that period, those beagles are then put down and their tissues are tested to make sure that there are no trace levels of the pesticides in their system. For a year, we have argued with the Brazilian authorities that there is a more effective way to do this testing without using beagles. And they've said, no, this is the test, it's forever and ever, amen. We went in November, reached out to the Humane Society of the United States and said, please join us in helping to lobby the Brazilian government to stop this testing. They said, great. And we all flew down to Brazil, to Sao Paulo, met with the officials. They said, we'll take it under advisement. The meeting was actually set for yesterday. Last Tuesday, the Humane Society issued a press release and a hidden camera video of beagles in cages being force-fed pesticides. So they abandoned us on this effort and started this whole public media, social media campaign that says, you guys weren't telling the truth. And we said, wait a minute, you were with us up until yesterday, until you weren't. What happened? They said, well, it just wasn't moving fast enough. And they called for petitions and to protest, and I personally have received about 6 death threats just in the last 24 hours. Our CEO has probably received about 24 death threats. But the thing that they didn't get is we stayed the course. So we kept going to Anvisa, which is the regulatory authority, and last Monday got their certificate that says, okay, Brazil has agreed to stop doing the testing. So it was a more sustainable solution. And by the way, the dogs can now be rehomed because it's early enough in the test that they're not contaminated. And so we're going to work with somebody to find that. But so our employees got that, and they were very appreciative that that was the ethos of the company. We're not going to have a knee-jerk reaction, stop the testing because the people with opposing points of view said that we should. We did it the right way. Well, now, here's where we are today, and I just had to hang up because I couldn't deal with this anymore. Because the Humane Society threw us under the bus, we said we'll work with anybody but the Humane Society to rehome the dogs. Now they're pissed off, excuse my language, they're pissed off because we didn't work with them, and they're now slamming the group that we did choose to work with to rehome the dogs. So, long answer to your question is the employees get it, they understand the value, they understand the ethos, but it's the outside world that still has a long way to go. And I think you mentioned this earlier, big ag is always going to be bad ag. in their minds. There's no way in their eyes, for us to be a responsible agricultural player.
Dana, is that a Western point of view, or is that globally pervasive, sort of this negativity? Because I think your example in Brazil got me thinking about, you've got some cross-cultural communication challenges as well. You guys are in 120 different countries?
Oh, yeah, 100.
You know, which, does the whole world view agriculture through the same lens, or
No.
what shows some of the differences you're seeing?
No, I mean, so the U.S. and Europe in particular, Europe is probably a little more harsh against ag, and in France and Germany in particular, farmers are viewed somewhere below used car salesmen in France and Germany. So they have a lesser view. In parts of Asia, we are viewed with a fair amount of respect, but not by the government. And what I mean by that is the government doesn't go out of the way to give farmers any favorable treatment as it relates to trade or taxation or anything along those lines. I think where we've probably got the cleanest or clearest runway would be in Latin America and Asia, in Africa, I'm sorry. Those regions of the world probably have the most support, and they're widely viewed as being responsible stewards of the land. Their role in supplying the food chain is acknowledged and respected, and they get a lot of government support in terms of subsidies, tariffs, things along those lines.
Let's talk a little bit about nuancing the narrative. Dr. Keenum, the chancellor of the university this morning, gave a keynote address, and he talked about Mississippi State as one of the top 10 agricultural research institutions in the United States. And we all, I think most folks recognize the fact that this is a world-class land grant institution with a world-class ag program. The people that come out of that environment are technically focused. A lot of them are technically focused. They're brilliant. They're motivated. They're incented by perhaps different things than a group of marketers and brand gurus from Coca-Cola.
Right.
Have you noticed any challenges in communicating to this? I mean, you've got thousands of PhDs on staff, I'm assuming, or tens of thousands perhaps.
That's
so
fair, yeah.
what's the nuance of communicating to them? What motivates those folks? What are watch-outs? What causes eyes to roll?
Well, there are two different tracks. So the agronomists that come to us, I think we could have been called Company XYZ, and that pipeline would continue, because ag itself is innovating so quickly that we don't have there's not a lot of education we have to do about ag being an exciting and dynamic industry for the people who are agronomists. Our biggest challenge is getting communicators to come into the fold. Most communicators who come out of land grant schools in particular want to do typically one of two things. They want to go to work for one of the associations, so Farm Bureau or the American Soy Association or National Corn Growers Association. They figure like that is really where their only opportunity is, because that's where historically the comms jobs have been. What we have to do a better job of as a corporation or as an industry is to show people that in order for us to meet the growing demands for food, it's going to require change across all disciplines, not just the agronomy. The agronomists are making technological changes very, very quickly. We have very few storytellers in our industry who can help change those people with opposing points of views minds and address them. That's our biggest challenge, is to get in the comms functions of schools like this one, like Iowa State, like Purdue, getting into those schools and making sure that we have a robust comms program, because our challenge is not technology. The technology is evolving fast enough on its own. Our challenge is making sure people are accepting and aware of that technology that comes out. And as much as I love our agronomists, they can't tell that story.
That's an interesting point, because John, keep me honest here, but I believe agriculture communication is taught in the ag school and not in your department?
There's a major, and they take some classes from us.
So there are some synergies. Do you think, Dana, that it would make sense for land grant institutions like the Iowa States, the Mississippi States, the Virginia Techs, the Texas A&Ms of the world to start integrating ag communication as a function of traditional communications department?
I think, and I'm guilty in this because I serve, as you mentioned, I serve on a couple of communications advisory councils. We are already behind the curve. We are already behind the curve in that regard, and we've got land grant institutions will lead the way in this space. The state universities, the private schools will not be the ones that create. They don't have the critical mass or the expertise to get the number of people that we're going to need in our field to tell the stories fast enough. I talked about our company being a change agent, Syngenta, Bayer, they're all going to say the same thing, and they're only going to grow. Their businesses are only going to grow. If you look at any industry forecast, right now, in the next 5 years, our industry is expected to double in size and then triple the next 5 years after that. So that's, we are one small segment of the agricultural industry. Think about the investment community that we have to talk to. I've spent the last 6 weeks on the road doing investor roadshows trying to sell our stock to the analysts. Most of them, even the ones that follow closely, because remember, they followed DowDuPont. They've never followed a pure ag company. There is a tremendous amount of education that we have to give to those analysts to help them understand that ag is a cyclical nature company. It's a cyclical industry. That first 3 months of the year is always going to be soft, which is why when we pull out, we're going to change our reporting cycle so we can, cut up the impact of that first, what has traditionally been the first quarter on our earnings results. They don't understand that. Now, we have a tremendous pipeline. They look at the value that we can unlock in that pipeline, but they don't understand the cycle of planting, and they don't understand the fact that Northern Hemisphere and Southern Hemisphere balance our business. They look at us as a largely U.S.-based company, and we plant in May and we harvest in September. And they think, okay, well, then that's where all the money is. Well, think about Latin America. Opposite. They have the opposite schedules. So it is a company that can deliver, or an industry that can deliver a very healthy return all year round. But no one has thought about the financial reporting metrics of an ag company. Completely untapped space. If I had 10 kids who were coming out of business school who focused on ag economics, they would be employed tomorrow. They would have no challenge in finding jobs tomorrow. So I think part of it is our mission as a company is to tell the story about the changing face of agriculture, and we'll do that. And there are other players who are going to try and do that story, but much like our former representative talked about, we've got to bring this narrative to places where it's unexpected, because people just don't know that this is a dynamic, changing industry. It's not the guy with the straw in his mouth and the overalls. Most farmers today do more on their smartphones than the average banker does in a week. Because they're in the combine, especially as it comes to September, October, they're in the combine for 12, 18 hours a day. So they've got to be technologically savvy. And we're not taught, there's so many comms opportunities to tell stories. One of the things we were able to do is we created a Pandora channel in Latin America for our farmers, because when they're in the combine, they're a captive audience. So we give them news, we give them music, we do ads.
Brilliant.
But as communicators, I don't think, if you talk to somebody who's a social media expert, they would never think about an ag channel as where they could become really strong and specialized.
Wow, that's fascinating. Dana, of all your stakeholders right now, where are the biggest trick boxes? Who are the toughest as far as audiences you're trying to reach with this narrative? Who are the toughest folks to get through to? You talked about just getting that story out there into new and unexpected ways, but specifically, what audiences would those be?
It's a very small audience, and they're all inside the Beltway. In the White House and the Beltway. That is the trickiest audience right now. I do not think that our elected officials understand the plight of the U.S. farmer right now. Farmers are struggling in the United States. You think about the China tariffs. So when that hit, soybeans were already in the ground. Corn was already in the ground. You can't change the trajectory of your crop once it's in the ground. So they've got grain bins full of soybeans, grain bins full of corn. Oh, and by the way, the other byproduct of that tariff was now steel and aluminum are more expensive because you're bringing back, it's more expensive because you can't get the cheaper steel and aluminum brought in. So not only do you have to build more warehouse space, it costs more to build more warehouse space. The banks don't care about that. Those loans are due. Very few farmers have unlimited savings that they can live off that interest and pay that money back. And no one seems to care.
Was that you mentioned earlier informally that you just came here from Washington, where you attended a couple of very large ag industry association meetings. What was the top line narrative from those meetings? Is it basically what you're saying?
So last week I was in D.C. with the American Soy Association, National Corn Growers, and we were doing our Hill visits and lobbying. And the number one request that they have is pass NAFTA 2, the U.S.-Mexico trade agreement. They were trying to brand it as UMESCA, but I don't think that brand is going to stick. But they want to get that passed because Mexico is our biggest trading partner, and right now it's not working. And that's what we wanted to. That's the message we want to say. And everybody said, "We heard you. We heard you. We heard you." We all go to dinner, and then the president tweets that the China tariffs are going to stay in place for the foreseeable future, counter to everything we heard over the course of 3 days.
Wow.
And farmers don't get mad.
Yeah.
They don't fight back like if it were, a consumer industry. They're having trouble figuring out how to organize and say we're pissed off and we're not going to take it anymore.
Tina, we have a few young folks here. They're just beginning their careers. We've got a few students here who are finishing up as well. You grew up in Atlanta, probably, I'm thinking,
Yep.
miles and miles from any farm. You didn't grow up into a farming family.
No.
Probably the most farmland you saw was on your drive up the Shenandoah Valley, I'm guessing, up to Lexington. How do you get your head around something completely new, a new industry that, to your point, is being revolutionized every day, reinvented every day? How do you get your head around it? What's the process? And I asked the question for the young folks who are going to basically be, most of them are going to be going into companies where they don't have a lot of background on the product or the brand or the culture. How did you get your head set straight around learning and doing it in such a quick time frame, 18 months?
It's not rocket science. I'll tell you exactly what it did. Full immersion. I had the benefit of full immersion. So coming in, when you come into a company in a leadership position, you have two basic paths you can take. You can figure out how to manage up and spend time with the CEO and the CFO and learn the corporate speak and the models and all that, or you can go and meet the customers and the sales teams. I chose to get in the truck, do the ride-alongs with our sales team, spend the night at farms, eat at farmers' houses, spend the weekend with them. I happened to be a good shot, so that worked out well that I could hunt and shoot and fish. And it worked out pretty well for me in that regard. But it was full immersion. I did 3 months of spending nights in people's houses, going to Rotary meetings, sitting in on association meetings and understanding what their challenges were and also how we sell to them.
Yeah.
And I figured out we had a really screwed up sales system because we had 3 people calling on one farmer. So the seed guy would come, then the crop protection guy would come, and then the digital girl would come, and that's how it worked out. And so not only did I get useful experience and get versed in the industry, and I have people now that I can call when I don't understand something. I can call Bill Gordon in Minnesota and say, look, so this is actually a very stupid story, but I'll share with you just to show how stupid I am.
We love stupid stories.
I decided I was going to play. I've always had a vegetable garden. I always did tomatoes and cucumbers and zucchini and stuff like that. But I decided since corn was our primary product, I'm going to grow corn. And I did it. And I was really scared to start calling people because I had no idea what I was doing. And I didn't understand you have to do detasseling. I had no idea about the whole detasseling process. And I don't know if anybody's ever done corn before, but detasseling is pretty important. And a lot of babies were made during the detasseling process too, I've discovered. And if you've ever detasseled corn, you'll get that joke. I won't explain it. Not being ashamed to call somebody like that, to say, hey, Bill, I got 20 stalks of corn. I don't know what to do next. Give me, and he would he'd laugh his ass off and make fun of me. But he told me what I needed to do to get it done. And that level of humility and question asking, I think, really helped me gain that understanding. Because it's like you said, most people are born into farming. You don't just one day go to college and decide I'm gonna go from being a business major to a farmer. It doesn't happen. And so getting them to embrace me was really important, and they taught me the business firsthand.
What's the biggest surprise learning so far in the last 18 months?
How over-leveraged most farmers are. It's incredible. I mean,
Financially,
yeah. I mean, financially, and the fact that land is abundant. But this is what goes. This goes to show you how little U.S. farmers are appreciated. Land is abundant, but people seem to think that farmers are the easiest ones to make a buck off. So renting an acre for $100 an acre, that's damn near impossible now. Anywhere I would dare you to go out and find a farmer who could find an acre they could rent for $100. Most people don't appreciate the fact that they're going to use that land in a very responsible way and charge a reasonable rate for it. It just doesn't happen. And that was the biggest. So in order for them to break even, they have to be over leveraged. I mean, a combine, a combine is depending on how many rows you have and how big, you're talking about a $500,000 piece of equipment.
Yeah,
And most farmers don't make that.
right.
And so it doesn't matter how efficient you are, the deck is stacked against you. And until we get people to help to understand that commercial farming is a viable way of life, provides an incredible service in terms of the food chain, they're still going to always be at a disadvantage.
Yeah. So much of your messaging so far, your narrative development at Corteva has been focused on, I mean, even the brand, even the name of the company. Can you explain that real quick?
Sure. So there are two elements to that. So as we were going through this exercise and we did these surveys of farmers trying to figure out what they wanted from their next ag company, we looked at the landscape about Monsanto and Bayer and Syngenta, and we were trying to figure out a name. And we went through all these names. And if anybody's ever had to do a trade or trademark a name, you've got to do a couple things. You got to make sure it's legally defensible, that you haven't stolen a trademark or inadvertently borrowed a trademark. You have to make sure it doesn't mean a curse word in another language, all that good stuff. And we came up with Corteva because cor is heart, core or heart, and teva means nature. So we like to think of our business being heart of nature. And if you look at our logo, and you probably can't see it from here, but as you fly in and out of Mississippi or the GTR, what is this, the Golden Triangle, we said it was called? And you see the fields, it looks like three fields coming together to represent the three companies that created it. So, we wanted to have a name that had a meaning and a purpose and supported our vision. And so that was a very exciting exercise. And I'm proud to say next week our first television commercial will air during March Madness next weekend. And so they'll be running in the land-grant areas. It's not a national buy. We're only buying television in areas where we have land-grant institutions. Proud to say that you'll be able to see it here in Mississippi. So watch the basketball games and look for the Corteva ad.
So sustainability obviously is foundational to your brand story. So no surprise then they also gave you that role as Chief Sustainability Officer a couple weeks ago. You talked about farmers and being embraced in those communities. How do they view sustainability? Do they care?
Oh, they absolutely care, but they view it as a threat. Because the only people that have introduced the concept of sustainability to farmers have been the people with opposing points of view. And so it has largely been introduced as a mandate, an unfunded mandate. We have tried to change the dialogue to say that we think we can make agriculture climate positive through a combination of things, but largely creating products that are more effective. So things that don't require as much water, like we're introducing rice seeds that don't require as much water. Things that require less runoff as you apply to a crop. There's less runoff, so you don't have to worry about the diversion of the water and filtration before it goes back into the water table. And so doing things like that. But part of it also is telling that story about farmers being the oldest and the most experienced environmental stewards. So that has been a challenge for them because we were the first group, as far as I can tell, that actually introduced it to them as a positive. We didn't introduce it as a mandate or a negative that you must do this or else. Saying, look, we're selling you products that reduce your environmental footprint. And by the way, if you do more of the things you're doing, we can actually reach a more climate positive position. That has been well received, but that's an area in my function that I want to work my way out of. I don't want sustainability in my organization. If it is in a non-revenue generating function, it loses its value. So part of my mission over the next 6 months is to get sustainability out of my shop and into the operations, because you've got to be, that's an entity where you have to be measured by. And I also know that, being a new company, when we spin out in June, if we have 2 bad quarters and they say, you've got to make cuts in order to be, sustainable, that's going to be one of the first things I'm going to have to cut, because it doesn't directly drive revenue to the bottom line.
Right.
And until we tie it to a function that can make it measurable and link to the bottom line, it has no chance of success in my mind. So I'm going to actively work myself out of that job over the next 6 months.
Got it. Let me open it up to the floor. I think, John, how many more minutes do we have? Are we done? I'm sorry. Okay. I'm not going to open up the floor. Dana, thank you so much.
Can I just say
Yeah.
one thing? One of the things I was hoping to share is one of the ways we're trying to get youth back engaged in farming is allowing them to be storytellers. So if you go to the 4-H's website or Corteva's website, there's a program called Farmfluencer. And it is designed to get kids to spend a day on a farm helping farmers tell their story about how they overcome their big challenges. They submit a 2-minute smartphone shot video. They have the opportunity to win $5,000. And our goal is to take, when we go live on June 1st, which is actually a Saturday, but June 3rd is when we go public trading, have all the videos on our website and create almost like a voice kind of contest where people can vote on those videos. And at the end, those winners we'll select 2 winners who can win $5,000. I encourage you to follow it on Twitter, look it up. It's going to be really exciting to see kids who probably have not ever been to a farm spend a day with a farmer telling their story and capturing it in a phone documentary series. And so that's one of the ways we're trying to get kids back into agriculture and help them become better storytellers.
Fantastic.
All right.
Ladies and gentlemen, Dana Bolden.
Thank you.